18 years ago, I made a very important decision, one that saved an organization and gave it the capacity to triple what it was doing without hiring any more staff or spending any more money. It wasn't a product launch, it wasn't a marketing campaign, it wasn't simply throwing money at the problem, but it was something much more important and much more powerful. So if you're finding that you're working really hard, that things just don't seem to be moving in the right direction, you're spending too much money or not making enough money, then stay tuned, because what I did and the decision I made will probably have a huge influence on the decisions you make going forward.
Hi, I'm John Firth, and for the last 10 years, I've been coaching CEOs and owners of small and medium-sized businesses. Before that, I was a strategy and management consultant, working for very large corporations, multinational companies, and so forth. That means I have both the strategic, long-term abilities that a strategy consultant brings to larger organizations, as well as the hands-on day-to-day experience that entrepreneurs go through building an organization. I bring both of these to bear to the work I do, and as you'll see from this video, sometimes the solutions are not the obvious ones.
So the organization was the Association of Management Consulting Firms, AMCF. It was the meeting ground of the most prestigious firms in a very prestigious industry, and I was leading it. Unfortunately, this was not just a turnaround situation, it was in dire need of a fix. We had exactly 6 weeks of cash left to save the organization to be able to make payroll and keep the lights on. So I had a very strong partner in my chairman, a new chairman who actually had a hand in hiring me. She was a senior IBM professional from the Global Business Services. She and I saw what had to happen immediately, which was to recruit a few new members. Instead of going to the old ones asking for more money, we knew there was still a segment of the consulting population that had recently returned to consulting and needed exactly what AMCF offered, which was a forum and a stamp of approval for these firms. And they were the big four accounting firms. If you remember, in 2002, with the meltdown of Arthur Andersen, 3 of the big four had spun off their consulting divisions, except for Deloitte. Deloitte had been a member throughout the period, but the other 3 had not. And since we made a lot of money from big firms in terms of their membership dues, we immediately contacted the leading chairmen, board members and so forth, senior partners at these 3 firms. And that was mostly my chairman's doing because she knew the industry participants very well. So we courted PwC, KPMG, and Ernst & Young. The first one to say yes was PwC, and that's what saved the organization. That gave us another 3 or 4 months to live in terms of cash flow. With that done, we could turn our attention to something much more important in terms of actually rebuilding, and I mean building, the organization as opposed to just saving it. The answer wasn't more money or hiring more staff or some neat new marketing approach. It was all about capacity. You see, a trade association that primarily adds its value through programming and interesting ideas and concepts that may be new to the consulting industry or at least important for senior leaders to discuss, only comes about through events. Plus the fact that we charge for events, so that was just added money. So we determined that it was probably about 45 to about 60 events a year, including an annual meeting, that would make the organization sustainable. However, it meant we couldn't hire anybody. So I have been aware of systems thinking and approaches for several years as a consultant. After all, Reengineering Corporation came out in 1994-95, and this was about 12 or 13 years later. So it was common currency to talk about systems and processes. But it wasn't until I talked to former senior partner from McKinsey, Bill Matasoni, when I asked him the question of what would he have liked to have leaned into more had we known more about it, and he said immediately systems thinking. That got me thinking that that was the approach I needed to take. And that was how I was able to begin thinking outside of discrete little pieces of work or programs in terms of a much larger picture. So you might think this was a simple decision that I made that I then implemented. It wasn't. The decision came only after some discussion and understanding of the situation, and the implementation was impossible to do without getting my staff on board and the chairman of the board and board members and those volunteers who were going to help us. So it didn't happen instantly, but it began to evolve. First, it started with me really clearly mapping out the different entities that we wanted to do programs about and for. That meant we started doing programs for the IT departments, for the marketing departments of these consulting companies. People think these are just amorphous organizations, but the back office has a huge role to play. And so we started catering to them, in addition to the senior partners and senior consultants that would come to our other events. And that exploded immediately. We had incredible turnout, especially for the marketing cohort. And once we sort of figured that out, the next thing was to actually start scheduling the events. We had to watch out for any competing events, holidays, and so forth. And once we had the schedule worked out, then it became a question of the content. What was the content? And that's where my personal experience and that of my chairman and the board was important, because we had been dealing with content, specifically content for our clients, but we also understood what the consulting industry needed to learn more about and the content that would attract them. So we began laying that out, and then it began a question of how would we distribute it? Where would the content come from? And that was either from speakers, authors, from internal people. We did panels and a variety of other things. We slowly worked out what the best combination was. We also began to see historically who attended what sort of events and what sort of events would take off, like the marketing events, and some of them would be a little slower, like the IT and technology events. Those were not as well attended, but we could map that out and we could tell because we had comparisons. That slowly, by the second year, completely took off, and we kept building and building. If you enjoyed this video, there are many others on my YouTube site. Click the subscribe button so you have ready access to all the videos the minute they come out. A few things happened as a result of the work that I did with my team. First, the team itself was highly productive. They weren't reinventing the wheel every time. They knew exactly what had to happen, they knew exactly who they could ask for help, and they had the deadline when certain things were required, either the program, or promotion, or the actual event, and so forth. Once that was clear, there was no problems. Then the other thing was, those who volunteered, the board and other members of the association who wanted to get involved, we knew exactly what to ask them for. Did we need them to host? Did we need them to provide us with some thought capital, maybe a speaker, maybe somebody internally who was seen as a thought leader on whatever topics, plus being able to tell them when the events would take place and when certain people should show up for certain events. And the third one was really the focus. With a lot clearer focus, there was a lot less waste, and the quality went up much faster, to the point where it was a self-reinforcing event, or it was self-reinforcing. People knew the quality, knew the value they would get, and they would show up because of that. And finally, we understood how the events would play out. Some events were highly popular, like anything dealing with marketing. 40, 50, 60 people would show up. Others, like for the IT and technology folks, was less heavily populated. We'd maybe get 10 or 15 people, but we knew that in advance. So we knew how to make the ask, the size of the room we needed, and so forth. So in the end, we were able to take the association from 15 or 16 events a year to over 50. And it was less strain, less difficulty, less nerves, and far higher productivity without adding any cost or any more staff. So the lesson here is very clear. Sometimes the answer to a seemingly insurmountable problem is not so obvious. In fact, it rarely is. You have to step back and you should ask yourself, am I going to do the simple thing, cut costs, or the most visible, tackle the visible? I could have easily asked for more money. I wouldn't have gotten it. I could have easily stuck to 15 or 16 events, but the association probably would have died within a year. No, I had to figure it out. And as I said, through conversations with senior partners, my own experience and so forth, and help from my chairman and my board, I finally arrived at the solution that saved this organization. In fact, we ended up, at the end of the 3 years I was there, with a surplus of over 50% of our operating budget as cash reserves, as opposed to how I started, which was 6 weeks of cash before we had to turn off the lights.